Hello students, you all are welcome. So again we are going to start with the same chapter. So remaining part we will cover up today. Now we discussed yesterday about the divergent evolution and convergent evolution. So now taking the topic forward, evidence for evolution from selective breeding of domesticated animals. So selective breeding is a method which is particularly done by human beings to find out which particular organism or a plant has some trait which is more useful for them. Okay, and accordingly the selective breeding was done, like the best ones. For example, let's take example of a cow. So suppose for example there is a herd of cows, okay, and one of the cows, this particular cow is giving a lot of milk. Say it is giving 10 liters of milk, and the other herd they are giving 3 to 4 5 liters of milk. So then this was selectively taken, this particular cow is selectively taken, and this was actually bred with a again with a particular bull, and then which also is good quality bull. So then now it will definitely give the offspring that might have better quality of milk or increased quantity. So here we're talking about quantity. So most probably the offspring that it is going to produce might produce more amount of milk when compared to offsprings of these particulars. So if selectively you doing it continuously, again the next breeding is done with the better organism in that particular population. So in this way ultimately you receive something that you really want more. Now let's take example, one more example. For example, if I have grown seeds of wheat in a particular farm. So here I've grown seeds of wheat here. So now some particular seeds will grow into plants that will have a lot of seeds in their you can say fruit. So the ones will be selected which will have more number of seeds or fruits in their particular you can say the fruit. So in that way these particular seeds will be collected, and in the next season these particular seeds will be grown again. And when these will be grown, so now these seeds probably will produce plants that most of them will give more number of seeds. So this is how the yield of the yield or you can say the crop yield is improved. Okay, and here the cattle's milk producing variety is produced. Okay, so that is done by the help of selective breeding. So this can be done in the case of domesticated animals and also can be done in the case of crop plants. So for example, the animals are domesticated for meat and milk production, for example sheep, transport like horses, and then pets like example is cats here. So the selective breeding actually allows you to take the desirable traits of a particular animal and produce more such animals with even better yield that you can receive from them. So the modern breeds of livestock are compared with wild species, most resemble and differences are often huge. So if you see a selectively breeded particular organism and you compare it with the wild species, after a long time period you might see there are a lot of differences between both of them, although they both belong to a same group at some point of time. But after continuous selective breeding, the livestock's quality is definitely better than the wild species if you compare. Okay, consider modern egg-laying hens and jungle fowl of southern Asia from which they have been developed, or consider Belgian blue cattle and aurochs, so which are now extinct, of Western Asia. So these were the particular animals from which selective breeding was continuously done to receive a desired organism of our interest. So there are much variations between different breeds of domesticated livestock as shown that by the diversity of dog breeds. So dogs are also breeded to receive the quality that people actually wanted, and many breeds of dog have been developed by artificial selection, starting with gray wools perhaps as long as 30 to 40,000 years ago. So since then, the process of selective breeding is continuously being done, and the result of that is the kind of breeds of dogs that we have today. So now similar patterns are observed among crop plants also. So humans have selectively bred a range of plant species for various purposes. So what are the purposes for which we do selective breeding in plants? For food, for humans, for example, wheat. So the particular plants which will have good nutrition in them and more amount of yield giving particular plants will be selectively will be selected, and they'll be crossbred with such similar plants, and a new variety is developed which actually continuously gives you more yield and better nutrition quality. Now fibers, for example, cotton, then cut flowers, for example, roses. So selective breeding is done in all these particular type of plants. Now, as with livestock, crop plants resemble wild species of plant but markedly different. Okay, in addition, there are many varieties of some crop plant species. It is obvious that domesticated animals and crop plants have not always existed in their current forms. So actually slowly and eventually they actually changed their morphologically, they also changed. So the only credible explanation is changes have been achieved simply by repeatedly selecting and breeding the individuals most suited to human uses. And this process is called as artificial selection. So in, if you see in wild conditions, so there will be you can say random breeding. Okay, so if this one is better quality and this one is low quality, definitely breeding might take place between both of them, and a new variety is found which is having characteristics of both of them, and it might not be the best one. Okay, similarly this might breed with another plant also which is also good quality, and certain two plants which are of low quality, they might also breed with each other. So a mixture of, you can say, mixture of varieties will be found if you see in the wild. But after artificial selection, there will be certainly, after a long time and continuous artificial selection, the morphological or physiological qualities and properties, or morphologically how the plant or the animal looks, there might be certain changes if you compare it with the wild type particular species that was the earlier species from where these plants were selected. So now these particular plants, after continuous you can say selection, they might look a little bit different from the ones from where they were actually selected at the first point. Okay, the considerable changes that have occurred in domesticated animals and crop plants over relatively short periods of time show that artificial selection can cause rapid evolution. So this might lead to rapid evolution. And over 12,000 or so years during which humans have grown crops and reared livestock, it seems reasonable to assume that natural selection could have caused major evolutionary changes over the billions of years of life on Earth. So similar changes by natural selection might have taken billions and millions of years on Earth, but due to continuous artificial selection, a lot of evolutionary changes have been observed in particularly livestock and crop plants that are selectively bred by the human beings. Now here is an example of a herbal cannabis and its dried flowers and fruits. So this cannabis sativa, it actually has a particular component, a secondary metabolite called as tetrahydrocannabinolic acid, and it is converted into tetrahydrocannabinol. And this particular you can say molecule, it is very helpful in treatment of you can say psychosis or schizophrenia, which are neurological problems. Okay, so this particular compound is of a lot of medical value, and through artificial selection, the average THC content that was produced by these cannabis sativa plants, it has actually increased a lot of times now by selective breeding within 23 years of time. So here we can see this chart. In 1995, the THC percent was approximately 4%, and now if you talk about, this is somewhere around, you can say 2017 or 18. Okay, so within this much of time, within 23 years of time, it was earlier 4%, and now in this particular time to 2018, 18 you can say, right? So 2018 it has reached up to 16%. So 95 to 2018, 16% from 4%. So it has increased actually four folds. And how it has been increased? Just because of selective breeding of this particular plant. So the particular plants which were giving more amount of THC were particularly selected, and they were crossbred with similar kind of improved amount of THC giving particular plants, and certain particular you can say a species is developed which is actually now producing more amount of THC. So this is the effect of you can say selective breeding, which in natural conditions it is not possible to develop or evolve such kind of species in a very short period of time. So selective breeding is actually making the evolutionary process very fast. Now, evidence for evolution from homologous structures. So Darwin found it curious that the forelimbs of humans, mole, horse, porpoise, and bat were apparently so different. So we already studied about homologous structure. So homologous structures, they are the same structures, okay, but with different function. Okay, they have different function, but the internal structure is same, and they have a same ancestor, common ancestor you can say, right? They have a common ancestor. Homologous structures are actually evolved from a common ancestor, and from a common ancestor different kind of function of these particular you can say traits have been developed, and this kind of evolution is called as divergent evolution. Okay, so this is divergent evolution, and here example of four limbs of humans, mole, horse, porpoise, and bat is given, and also I told about the dolphin's fin. So were apparently so different, they all are different from each other, yet inside them they are the same bones in same relative positions. So Darwin called such similarities unity of type. Okay, these limbs are pentadactyl. So what is pentadactyl? I already told you, just like five fingers are present in our hands, so that is called as pentadactyly, which means they have five digits, toes or fingers. Pentadactyl limbs are excellent example of homologous structures, features with similar anatomical position and structures despite differences in function. So their functions are different, but still the structure is similar. It is pentadactyl. Whether you see a human hand, if you see a mole's forelimb, or a horse forelimb, or a porpoise forelimb, or if you see a bat's wing, so in that also pentadactyl condition is seen. Okay, so let's see what are pentadactyl limbs. So bone structure, single bone in the proximal part. So forelimb, it is called as humerus. So I'll just show you it in with one example of human beings. Okay, so here forelimb is humerus, and hind limb it is called as femur. So this is humerus and this is femur. So this is this particular bone. Now it is common in all of these organisms that we are talking about here on the top. Just we discussed certain examples. So all these examples, these particular forelimb bones are exactly the same. Okay, that shows that they definitely have a homologous evolution. Okay, who are these structures are homologous. So this particular bone is humerus and femur, and here this particular bone is radius and ulna in forelimb, and hind limb it is tibia and fibula. So radius and ulna and tibia and fibula, which is two bones in the distal part. So in the proximal part they are humerus and femur in all these organisms that we just discussed, and the two bones in the distal part are radius and ulna in the forelimb, and in the hind limb they are tibia and fibula. Okay, similarly group of wrist or ankle bones, they are called as carpals in forelimb and tarsals in hind limb. So here we can see carpals. So this particular wrist joint we are talking about is called as carpals, and this particular part is called as tarsals, which is joint of feet with the particular leg. Okay, so after that series of bones in each of the five digits. After that particular carpal and tarsal comes the phalanges, okay, or metacarpals and metatarsal and phalanges. So they particular, see, these are metacarpals, okay, and these are called as phalanges, and these are metatarsals and phalanges. So here the pentadactyly can be seen in this particular part of the organism, and which is definitely common in all of the organisms that we just discussed. So here are certain pictures that they have shown here. Figure 8. So all amphibians, reptiles, birds and mammals have the same pattern of bones. So here if you see this particular structure and this particular structure in this particular organism, or if you see in this particular organism, they all actually have similar forelimb and hind limb, similar kind of structures are found. Here also in the wings are the forelimbs and these legs are the hind limbs. So they all will have similar bony structures in them, which definitely shows they all are from different origins. So these are reptiles and these are amphibians, sorry, these are basically birds, right? And all these organisms, they are having a common sort of forelimb and hind limb bony structure that shows a common ancestor. They have all originated from a common ancestor. Now crocodiles walk or crawl on land and use their webbed hind limbs for swimming. Penguins use their hind limbs for walking and forelimbs as flippers for swimming. So the second picture is probably of a penguin. Okay, this is a penguin. And echidnas use all four limbs for walking and use the forelimbs for digging. And next is frogs use all four limbs for walking and their hind limbs for jumping. So this is a frog and this is a echidna and this is a penguin and this is a crocodile. So they all have similar kind of forelimb and hind limb structures. So you can see here the structures of a mole, a porpoise and a horse. Okay, and this is human and this is a bat. So a bat's wing, actually it is made on these structures. A webbing is done, so this is how the whole wing is found. But if you see internally, the bony structures will be just like human hand, okay, in their wings. So this is what is called as homologous structures, and this particular evolution of this homologous structures in different organisms, different group of organisms, is called as divergent evolution. You can see differences in relative lengths of thickness of horse bones. The metacarpals and phalanges have been lost during the evolution of penguin forelimb. So we can see that here, right? The explanation for homologous structures such as pentadactyl limb is that they were inherited from a common ancestor but have evolved in diverse ways, and they have become adapted in different functions. So they all are having similar kind of structures, but here in horse, the, you can say, the pentadactyly structures, the metacarpals, metatarsals and phalanges, they have lost in the evolutionary time period after certain years. The common ancestor of all tetrapods, which are four-legged vertebrates, had pentadactyl limbs, which is probably used for walking on land. All of its descendants retain the same basic arrangement of limb bones, and this is Darwin's unity of type. That is, that shows that they all have a common ancestor. Okay, there are many examples of homologous structures. They do not prove that the organism have evolved into present forms or that the group of organisms had a common ancestry, nor do they reveal anything about the mechanism of evolution. However, they are difficult to explain without evolution. Okay, so they all are having similar structures, so that itself is making us understand that they definitely must have a common ancestor, or you cannot say it surely, but this is what the connection, this is what the connection that you can actually interpret. Okay, the structures that Darwin called as rudimentary organs are particularly interesting. So what are rudimentary organs? Which are no more of use for the particular organism, but their ancestors had a use of these particular organs, and that is why they're still present today in different organisms. So the reduced structures, they have no function and are known as vestigial organs. Examples is the beginning of teeth found in embryo baleen whales. Despite adults being toothless, the small pelvis and thigh bones found in the body wall of whales and some snakes, and the appendix in humans. So these are the examples of some vestigial organs. So they have no use now in particular organisms. So see, if you talk about small pelvis and thigh bones that are found in whales, so whales, they actually swim in the water, so they do not need any thigh bones, but their ancestors, they actually had this particular organ, this particular part, so that is why it is retained in whales still till date. And certain structures might have been lost also in the evolutionary time period, but certain particular parts are still found, that for example, humans have the appendix, which doesn't have any use now, and their ancestors might have had a use of this. These structures are easily explained by evolution. They no longer have functions, so are being gradually lost. So actually now appendix is becoming a rudimentary part, a small part, which is actually decreasing in size. Probably after so many years, we have a very small appendix now, and earlier it might have been a big organ that was present in the particular organism. Now let's talk about convergent evolution. So just now we discussed homologous structures, and they were developed due to divergent evolution. If we talk about convergent evolution and at the origin of analogous structures, so here certain ancestors which were from different groups, they actually got to live in similar environmental condition, and due to the selection pressure and due to several survival strategies, and due to after a long time of evolution, they all have developed common, you can say, features, or common function will be better. So common functions they have, but their structures or internal structures, you can say, structures are different. Okay, and they also have different ancestors. They have evolved from different ancestors. They are not developed from single ancestor. So there are similarities between the tails of fishes and tail and the tail fins of whales. However, when we study these structures, we find they are very different. The wings of birds and insects are also similar because they both are helping in flying, and the tails of fishes and tail fin of whales, they are helping in swimming. The function is same, but they actually have different structures if you see them internally. Similarly, wings of bird and insect, they also have a lot of dissimilarity if you see their structure, but their function is same. They help in flying. So in some respect, but close examination reveals that these similarities are superficial. Such features are known as analogous structures. Now, evolutionary explanation of analogous structures is they had different origins but became similar because they perform similar function. They are called as convergent evolution. It can be difficult to determine whether similar structures in different organisms are homologous or analogous. Cladistics increasingly used to deduce the evolutionary origin. So this is what the method that we use to compare between organisms and to find out if the evolution was convergent or divergent. Okay. Consider the central nervous system of annelids, arthropods, vertebrates is an example. So they all have a CNS, but actually their structures are very different. So here we are talking about the central nervous system, homologous or analogous. So these are bilaterians. So bilaterians, we mean that they have a head to tail bilateral structure. So these all are bilaterians. So if you see annelids, okay, so if you see the first original was Xena coelomorph, okay, and they actually had a separate branch which developed into hemichordates, vertebrates, and a separate branch developed into arthropods, nematodes. Again, one more branch came into rotifers, platyhelminths, okay, brachiopods, nematodes, and annelids. So if you see vertebrates and annelids, they are very far away from each other. So that shows that they definitely have very much, they'll have several differences in their central nervous system. And if you see arthropod and annelid, they will also have several differences. But arthropods and vertebrates, they are still closer when you compare to arthropod with a annelid. So that is how you can understand Now let's see here a human eye and an octopus eye in the right. They strikingly, their eye structure is very much same in many respects, but the human eye has nerve fiber in front of the retina. So this is the retina actually. So this one is the human eye, and this is basically the retina, the red lines that you see. This is the retina.